Alright, now this is my video on why I think that the United States of America is the greatest country in the face of the earth. And I know I'm going to get a lot of slack for it. A lot of people are going to say, you know, how can you say that considering all the events that have occurred? I'm going to be honest with you. The United States has a lot of social and economic issues. But I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it's not ringing true to what it was actually founded upon. When I say the United States is the greatest country, I mean on the foundation. What exactly defines them as a country? In order to basically define or understand the United States, you need to look at two documents. You have, the Constitution, and then you have the Declaration of Independence. And in the Declaration of Independence, they said that basically that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, that is, and I'm not talking God, I mean whatever essence created man, gave them certain unalienable rights. See, these rights are intrinsic to you. They can never be taken away or given to you. They aren't given to you by a man. They aren't given to you by a government. They're given to you for just existing. It's kind of along the lines, if you can think it, you can do it. And the interesting thing about it is that, you know, the Founding Fathers really understood what the function of government was. You see, you have the idea that something created man, then man created government below them. Government is not above man. It is not a holy being. It works for man. It serves you. You see, I'm going to go into a little bit about the structures of government and why I think the United States is great. It has a lot to do with its simplified structure. So many other countries have these very complex ways of dealing with government, all these different little, parliaments and whatnot. The United States has a written constitution. I can get into that soon. But the idea is that it does have a written form of government with laws and rules. And we have three branches. You see, we have three branches rather than an even number of branches so that we don't have two sides fighting against one another. There's always going to be an odd vote in a sense. We had this thing called the Connecticut Compromise, and that was back in the day when we had colonies. Many of them were deciding how can we represent people's interests. Some people said what we should do is we should have it population based, so that if you have a lot of people, you're going to have a lot of representatives to address their needs. Well, colonies like Rhode Island said, we're so small, New York's always going to win. We need to have a way to be equal. So they said, well, maybe we can have an equal number, let's say 2 per colony. And then, once again, the larger colony said, well, that's not fair. We have more people. How are their needs going to be addressed with only 2 people? So what happens is we had this little compromise where the legislature, which is a very important part of our government, the legislative branch, which basically creates the laws and rules, basically, would have 2 houses. The first house would be the representative house. Now, the representatives are all based on population. Now, originally, the number would increase over time. But we've capped that number at 435. Otherwise, it would just get so expensive and so many people wouldn't really work. The Senate, on the other hand, has 2 people per state. And that number is also capped. So the idea is, though, if we do enroll more states, obviously there's going to be more senators. But the idea is that the people go to the representatives and senators, and they basically say, hey, I have an issue. And then the representatives and senators work on it, draft a bill, which becomes a law. And then that law gets sent up to the president. You see, the next branch of government, therefore, is the executive branch. And the executive branch was never intended to be as big as it is nowadays. Originally, it was supposed to be kind of like the people's savior. He wasn't supposed to be some big warmonger or anything like that. It was just generally, if something bad got through the legislative branch, the president would come down and say, okay, I got to fix this. I'm going to use my veto power to strike it out. And let's say something bad does happen through the legislative branch. Goes to the president signs on to it. Now what happens? Well, if it's a bad law, you can go to the courts, the federal court, the Supreme Court, and that's called the judicial branch, which is a branch that unfortunately so many people forget about, but is very important. You see, the Supreme Court justice, what they do is they sit there and they decide, is this law constitutional? Does it violate people's personal liberties and rights? If it does, it can't be a law and it's thrown out. Now, some people call the United States of America a democracy, which it's not. It's not a democracy at all. And in fact, it's actually a good thing. You see, even back in the days of Greece, people wrote about the hardships of a democracy. That you have mob rule, manipulated votes. That there's like something big that happens, people vote on instinct, emotion, rather than actually thinking about the scenario. So what we have, now get ready for this because it's a long term, is a constitutional, democratic republic. It's constitutional that it's limited by whatever the laws in the Constitution say on paper. It's a democratic because, well, everyone's vote is counted equally. And we do somewhat believe in that, mob rule agenda a little bit. And then the next part, is that it's a republic, which means we have representatives, which are people whose job it is to uphold certain responsibilities and also make sure that the people, that they're not just, I don't want to say under control, but everything's going okay with them. So the interesting thing is that people say, you know, well, what happens if we had a democracy? Well, essentially, it'd almost be like two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. You see, the issue would be that if the 51% of the people want to get rid of 49% of the people, it would be completely legal. All right, but once again, I was saying, if you really want to appreciate what's great about the United States of America, you really have to look into particularly the Bill of Rights. You have certain rights and liberties established to protect your freedom and also a good standing government. All right, many other forms of government don't go into that detail, and the way they've written their constitution is that the governments have given you these rights and liberties. But in our system of government, these rights and liberties are already given to you. All right, so the government basically is limited by the Constitution. It tells what the government can't do and only where it's allowed to venture into. If you get later into the Bill of the Rights, no, the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments, all right, if you're interested, you know, if you don't know. But if you get later into it, you start seeing how it starts talking about personal liberties and states' rights and liberties, so that if the federal government wants to do something, it has to go through the states. That's one of the great things about the United States, is that we have states' rights, rather than a federal government that kind of just imposes law en masse that affects everyone differently because they live in different demographic and geographic regions. We have a system of government where essentially you have a state that has to sign off on everything. You have a state that makes its own laws and rules as necessary. But, you know, I probably skipped a few things that are really great about this country. But once again, like I said, there is some hardships right now. We do have some social issues, some economic issues. If you ask a lot of kids what's great about America, they'll tell you, well, we have a lot of money. Well, we don't have any more money anymore. People say, well, we have a lot of sports. Well, sports have never helped the society, really. So when I look at, you know, why America is the greatest country in the face of the earth, I'm looking at it from a different angle. The philosophical beliefs that have affected nations all around the world. And that's basically all I have to say about that.